The winter morning bit at Emily's cheeks as she hurried toward the school gates. Her mind already tangled with emails waiting at work and the groceries she had forgotten to buy last night. Children spilled out of the building in waves, laughter mixing with the crunch of boots on frost. She spotted her son, Daniel, bounding toward her with his backpack half-zipped, his red scarf trailing behind him like a banner. Just as he reached her, the scarf slipped loose from his small shoulders and fluttered onto the icy ground. Emily instinctively reached out, but before she could bend down, the school janitor, a man she had seen many times but barely noticed, was already there. His movements were slow, deliberate, his gloved hand gently lifting the scarf from the slush. His faded blue cap sat crooked on his head, and the lines etched into his weathered face told stories Emily never cared to know. Instead of gratitude, something sharp rose in her chest. A long day, her constant fear of Daniel catching a cold, and the sight of someone else handling her child's belongings boiled together until the words burst out of her. "Please don't touch my son's things," she snapped, her voice slicing through the morning air. The janitor froze, the scarf hanging limply from his hand. His eyes lifted to hers, clouded with something she couldn't name. Pain, maybe, or a memory she wasn't part of. Slowly, without a word, he extended the scarf toward Daniel, who looked confused but quickly looped it back around his neck. Emily avoided the man's gaze, pulling her son close, her jaw set tight. She convinced herself she was protecting Daniel, yet as the janitor turned away, shoulders hunched, a strange heaviness settled in her chest that she couldn't quite shake. That night, Emily sat at the kitchen table long after Daniel had gone to bed. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, but her mind kept replaying the moment at the school gate. She could still see the janitor's hand, calloused and trembling slightly as he held out the scarf. She could still hear the echo of her own sharp voice. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. People needed to respect boundaries. She was just being a careful mother. Yet the image of the man's slumped shoulders as he walked away pressed down on her like a weight. There had been something in his eyes that unsettled her, a flicker of sorrow that didn't belong to a stranger, simply handing over a child's scarf. Daniel's soft humming drifted from his room, breaking her thoughts. She peeked in and found him twirling around in his pajamas, the red scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. He was singing a tune she hadn't heard in so long, a tune his father used to whistle when he came home from work, before the illness took him. Emily's chest tightened as the memory washed over her. The scarf had been her late husband's favorite color, a gift he'd chosen for Daniel's last birthday. Tears pricked her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. She didn't want to fall apart in front of her son. Still, the guilt wouldn't loosen its grip. She had spoken to the janitor like he was invisible, like his kindness meant nothing. And yet, for a fleeting moment, his expression had carried the same shadow of loss she herself carried every day. Emily whispered to herself, "I'll apologize tomorrow." But when she lay down to sleep, her pride whispered back, he shouldn't have touched it in the first place. The night stretched on, long and restless, as she wrestled with the truth she didn't yet want to face. The next morning, Emily arrived at the school earlier than usual. The air was biting, clouds of breath rising from the small clusters of parents waiting at the gate. She wrapped her coat tighter and scanned the grounds, her eyes settling on the janitor. He was shoveling snow from the walkway, his movements unhurried but steady, as if each scoop carried more than just the weight of snow. She watched him for a moment unnoticed. His faded jacket looked too thin for the cold, and the way he leaned on the shovel between pushes made him seem older than she remembered. Something about his solitude tugged at her, though she quickly shook it off. "Mom!" Daniel's bright voice broke her thoughts. He came skipping toward her, scarf bouncing loosely around his neck, as carefree as only children could be. In his excitement, the scarf slipped again, sliding into the freshly cleared snow. Emily instinctively stepped forward, but the janitor was already there. Just like before, he bent slowly, carefully, and picked it up. She tensed, her first instinct screaming to say something, but this time the words stuck in her throat. The man didn't look at her right away. Instead, he brushed the snow gently off the fabric with his rough fingers, almost like he was handling something fragile, precious. Then he knelt and handed it to Daniel, his voice low, trembling, carrying a weight Emily hadn't expected. "He reminds me of Daddy," the janitor whispered. The world seemed to still around them. Daniel smiled innocently, wrapping the scarf back around his neck. But Emily stood frozen, Her breath caught as the words sank into her chest. The janitor finally looked up at her. His eyes glistened, and for the first time, Emily saw him not just as a janitor, but as a man carrying his own grief. The echo of her late husband's memory swelled in her heart, colliding with the pain in his. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her throat was tight, and all she could do was watch him straighten slowly, shovel still leaning against the snowbank, his gaze heavy with unspoken stories. Emily stood there, unable to move, as if the world had suddenly gone quiet except for the faint crunch of snow beneath shifting feet. Daniel tugged at her hand, smiling brightly, completely unaware of the invisible threads of sorrow weaving between the two adults. The red scarf hung snugly around his small neck, its ends swaying with every movement, a living reminder of the man they both missed in their own ways. Her heart ached as she looked at the janitor. His eyes, wet and raw, held a depth she recognized all too well. It was the same emptiness she carried each night, when she reached for the side of the bed that was no longer warm. In that moment she realized his words had not been careless. They had come from a wound as deep as her own. Shame flooded her cheeks as she remembered how harshly she had snapped at him the day before. She had treated him like a stranger with no right to touch her son's things, when in truth, he had only touched them with reverence, with love. She opened her mouth, but no apology would come. Her throat was too tight, her chest too full. Instead, she took a step closer, her voice breaking softly as she whispered, "Thank you." The janitor blinked, his expression shifting ever so slightly. He gave the smallest nod, almost as if words were too heavy for him as well, then picked up his shovel and turned back to his work. There was no bitterness in his movement, no resentment, only the quiet endurance of a man who had learned to carry grief like a second skin. Emily knelt beside Daniel, adjusting the scarf with trembling fingers. Her son giggled and hugged her, his warmth seeping into her frozen hands. She kissed his forehead and held him close, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. As they walked away, Emily turned back once more. The janitor's figure stood against the pale winter morning, his shovel cutting through the snow, steady and strong. She understood now. They were two broken hearts, who had brushed against each other in the cold, finding a fleeting, unexpected moment of healing. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt that maybe she wasn't as alone in her grief as she had always believed.